Hey folks, Ariel from Finance over here, where today we are going to harvest some rhubarb and make a lovely dessert. This is the first year my rhubarb plants have gotten big enough to harvest. As you can see, they're all pretty sizable now, and I've actually pulled rhubarb off them once already. But they were little tiny starts off the root of another friend's a couple years ago, and now they've gotten strong enough to make plenty of their own. Now, if you've never picked rhubarb before, you don't cut it or anything, you just grab a leaf or a stalk and you kind of pull, and it pulls apart right at the base all by itself. So I'm just going to harvest the biggest leaves kind of around the outside of each plant. I'm not going to take all of any plant because I want it to keep growing. Got pine needles stuck in my stuff here because of the woods that I live in. Pick a bunch of these stalks, and then something to be aware of, like a lot of other plants in a garden, not the whole rhubarb plant is edible. In fact, most of it is very poisonous to people, and a lot of other things. The leaves especially are poisonous. The stalk part is not, but the leaf is. So I'm going to show you a couple things to do here in just a minute. A few more leaves out of here. It's really exciting to have this stuff big enough to harvest a bunch now. I think I'm going to call that good. So since all I want is the stalks, not the leaves, get my pile together here. And I'm simply going to go right up to where the leaf part joins onto the stalk and cut it and make myself a pile of just the stalks. Now I'm blanking at the moment on the name of the toxin that's in the leaves, but it breaks down pretty quickly as things compost, so there's no issue with just putting these leaves in the compost, which is what I'm going to do. Or you could lay them around things as mulch. They do keep weeds down, used that way as well. But the other thing you could do, which I don't need at the moment, is you can make a bug spray out of them. I did this earlier in the year when some of my little tiny plants coming up with their first two baby leaves were getting eaten up by flea beetles, which are like smaller than the size of, a period and normal font on the end of a page. So they're very tiny, but they eat lots of little holes in very tender leaves. These make a poison. I just took a bunch of them, put them in, covered them with water, and simmered them for like a half hour, then strained the leaves out, and then put that liquid in a spray bottle and sprayed it on little leaves. Now that is poisonous to you too, so only use that kind of bug spray on something where you want any bug to die. These weren't a flowering plant there where I wanted pollinators or anything like that. It was just the first little sprouts of leaves, and I just wanted to avoid having them so weakened that it would kill the whole plant. And I wasn't going to be eating those first two leaves either. So I just mixed up a spray bottle and just a few spritzes on there, and that seemed to take care of my flea beetle problem and didn't cost me anything. So, almost done here, but like I said, I don't need any more of that, so I'm not making more today. I am just going to go put my whole leaf pile into the compost. And now I'm going to take my usable part here, all the stalks in the house, and wash them up. Okay guys, so I got my rhubarb inside here and gave it all a rinse. It's all left the leaves out in the garden. And so we're going to just make some rhubarb bars. So actually the first thing we're going to do is make a crust for this. And I don't usually measure, but I'm going to use this just to scoop things. Get some almond flour. If you don't have almond flour, but you do have whole almonds and you've got like a food processor, you could just use whole almonds in this and mix this in a food processor, and that would work fine. What I'm going to do, let's look at this here. That is probably enough. So let's say about a cup of ground almonds, a cup of oats. I'm just going to do about equal proportions. portions there. And I'm just going to mix this right in the pan here to not make any extra dishes more than I need to. Just a tiny bit of sugar. This is a raw cane sugar. I don't know, maybe like 2 tablespoons of sugar there, just enough to sweeten it up a tiny bit. And a stick of butter. You could also use coconut oil if you prefer not to use butter. And it would be fine to melt the butter for this. I just had pulled it out of the fridge earlier, so it's kind of soft because it's a pretty warm day. So I didn't take the time to melt it. I'm just going to mix this up. Oh, we're going to turn the oven on, actually. I have been loving my new oven since it uses no electricity at all. And I can definitely hear that it lit. I can see the flame. It's always a good idea to double check. And make sure my oven racks are where I want to, yeah. That'll be fine. So that heats up really quick. I don't need much preheating. While that does its heating, just going to mix this up to be our crust. These bars are really, really tasty, and you could add strawberries or raspberries or other things with the rhubarb if you like. Today I'm doing just rhubarb because I got plenty of rhubarb and I like its flavor by itself, though I like the flavor with the other guys as well. And now we talked about the rhubarb leaves are poisonous. I know some people, I saw somebody comment on something else the other day about it. So, oh, well, if one part of the plant is poisonous, should you be eating any of it? A lot of people don't know that a lot of parts of a lot of things we eat all the time are actually poisonous. Every part of a tomato plant is poisonous except for the fruit. You can't eat tomato leaves or stems to the best of my knowledge. Potato plants, they're also a nightshade. They are poisonous, and even if the potatoes get exposed to sunlight and turn green, they that becomes poisonous. It develops a compound called solanin. Carrot leaves are poisonous. Carrot roots are great. Almonds are can be extremely high in arsenic or cyanide, one of the two. And they're pits and all the rest of everything else on the entire almond tree except for the. And cashews are super toxic. There's a reason you never, if you buy a mix of nuts to crack yourself, you'll never see a cashew in a shell, because even a tiny bit of one of those shells would be enough to potentially kill you. What else do we eat all the time that comes from poisonous? Oh, a tapioca plant is completely poisonous except for the root, and only then when it's cooked. Kidney beans, which are used in lots of chilies and sometimes baked beans and stuff like that, completely poisonous unless properly prepared. That's why you don't tend to see dry kidney beans as well. They're usually canned because then they've already been cooked. We're going to set our little timer here for 10 minutes and check back in on that. That is baking at 350. And while that's doing that, I'm going to make our rhubarb filling here. I know there's other poisonous stuff, but you get the idea. There's lots of plants that we eat all the time that are, some part of the plant is somewhere between not edible and might give you mild indigestion and will kill you. So I do encourage people to experiment with cooking and try different things, but if you're going to eat things that came from foraging or even from a garden, make sure you know what it is and make sure you do know that it is edible. Just a word of caution there. Just because you can eat one part of the plant does not mean that all of the other parts are necessarily safe. Though with some things they are. You can eat beet roots, and beet greens are awesome. But don't do that with carrots and so on. So these are just good things to know if you're newer to gardening and or cooking and might not be aware of that. So I've got a good pile of rhubarb here. I'm not measuring this at all. I'm just using everything I got. Most of the time, if you look up a recipe for any kind of bar like this, I usually do double the amount of the fruit, which in this case we're considering these rhubarb stems a fruit, and because I like that way more than the crust part personally. So, got that in my pan. And we are going to make a little bit of a sauce. Going to need just a little bit of sugar. I'm going to use the same raw cane sugar. And I don't like this very sweet, but rhubarb is pretty tart on its own. So I'm going to say maybe that's like 1/3 of a cup or something in there. And then need a little bit of water just to get this cooking. Some juice will cook out of the rhubarb as it cooks. I'm going to do maybe yeah, it might be like 1/2 cup of water in there. Just enough to get it going. And then for a thickener, you could use cornstarch, but I tend to avoid using a lot of corn products. And this is actually arrowroot powder, which is another very good thickener. Works almost exactly like cornstarch if you've ever used that. And I'm going to put a couple tablespoons in there. Let's see if we need it a little thicker as it cooks or not. And that's going to take a minute there to start cooking. You can see the arrowroot powder very easily dissolves into the water there. So as soon as that starts to simmer, that's going to start thickening up. And in the meantime, while that's going and our crust is baking, we can make our topping. And our topping is going to look very much like our bottom part. Just a little more oats. Again, I prefer the topping on the light side because I prefer more of the fruit or the rhubarb. A little bit more sugar. A little bit more of ground almonds. And some more butter here to make it all stick together. And again, you could substitute coconut oil if you prefer. I love coconut oil and I do that as well, but I also really like butter. But you could easily make this a dairy-free or vegan dish if you wanted to use coconut oil instead. And so we're just going to make that into a little bit of a crumb. And then just because I like it, we're going to put a little bit of cinnamon in there. Maybe a teaspoon or so. Because I find cinnamon tasty with a lot of things. Keep checking on our rhubarb here. As this starts to cook, you'll start to see that liquid going from looking whitish where the arrowroot is dissolved, or the cornstarch if you're using that, into the liquid, to looking clearer. When it is fully thickened, it will be it might have a little bit of color from the rhubarb, or if you want to add some strawberries or raspberries or something like that, but it's not going to have that white color. It's going to look more of a translucent color. So there we got our crumb topping. Should be good to go. Crust should be about half done baking by now. Oh, and I forgot, I'm going to put just a little bit of lemon juice in here. The acid is just kind of tasty with a combo of other things. You could also do orange juice. I just don't have any orange juice. Don't have any orange juice around at the moment, and lemon juice works just as well, or you could do a little of each. Turn that up just a tiny bit. And I can clean up. Forgot to do a little pinch of salt. Good unrefined sea salt. Just kind of brings out all the flavors. So all those things are doing that. I can tidy up my area here. Here goes our timer for checking on the crust. I'm going to turn it up a little bit to 400 just to kind of brown the top. Set this timer for another, say, 5 minutes, just to make that kind of goldeny. Okay, you can hear that starting to thicken, and I don't know if the camera will show you as you look down in there, you can start to see the bottom is it's getting a little thick. I think I'm actually going to need just a little more liquid. Keep it from getting too thick while the rhubarb cooks. A little bit more water in there. You can already kind of see how the sauce is going from white to being a little more translucent as it is thickening up there, and you can kind of see really clear chunks in the middle of it. Those are the fully cooked bits, and the rest of it is still cooking. That's mostly thickened. There's the timer. So I'll let this simmer on low for a little bit to kind of soften up and actually cook the rhubarb chunks, because otherwise they're pretty crunchy. And we're going to pull this out of the oven for now. Perfect. Keep the oven on, but I'm going to turn it back down to 350 there. Set my crust over here. Just getting golden on the edges. Way too hot to touch right now. And that looks good for the rhubarb. And if this isn't quite, if you don't thoroughly cook starch like cornstarch or arrowroot powder, you can kind of taste the uncooked starchiness to it. But I'm not concerned about that either way, even though I'm pretty sure this is thoroughly cooked, because we're going to put it on the crust and we're going to bake it. So it's going to have some more time in the heat to finish cooking. And I'm just going to kind of dollop this around. If you put it on one big plop, you can kind of tear up your crust as you try to then spread it. So it's a little easier if you spread it a bit as you pour it on there. Try to clean all of our sauce out. And I am just going to spread it around there a little bit. Try not to break up the crust under it. If you had your crust done a little more ahead of time, it would be a little firmer. Like right there, I can tell I just pushed a little hole in it. That will be fine. There we go. And then we're going to put our crumbs on top. And I just kind of sprinkle this around. I find if I start sprinkling at the edges first, somehow I usually get enough on the middle by the time I get the edges done. And if I start on the middle, then I end up with none on the edges, just as a general principle with anything I'm covering like that. So there we go, and that crumb topping will kind of sink into the rhubarb as it bakes. And we're going to pop this back in the oven. Doesn't that look yummy already? Being aware that that pan is still super hot. going to bake that for about another 15 minutes. So I'll set the timer there. Check back in then. Okay, 15 minutes later, we are going to pull this out. Oh, I can hear it bubbling. It smells so good. This is perfect. Now, if you added strawberries or raspberries, it would have a little bit more of a really pretty red color, but like I said, I really like just the rhubarb as well. You can see it bubbling all over the edges there. Super hot. The crumb topping is just a little bit crispy. Look at that. It's still a little soft. Once that cools and you refrigerate it, you should be able to easily slice those bars and you know, be able to actually pick them up. No way at all when it's this hot. So that is a good way to use rhubarb if you've got some, or if you know, whether you grow your own or you've still got some around in farmers markets and stuff in your area, go get some and give it a shot. Just don't eat the leaves. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.